Hi, I'm Patric, CEO and founder of Favro, and this is the Learn from Leaders podcast. The background to these interviews is that Favro clients are some of the most innovative and agile businesses out there. And it's used for collaborative planning by marketing teams, by product teams, HR, management teams. And what this means is that we get to know some truly inspiring people. So what we do in this podcast is that I invite them here for a conversation about something where they are true leaders, so we can all learn from it. Let's go. Hi, this is Learning from Leaders, and in the podcast today, I got Zoë with me. How's it going?
Great. How are you, Patric?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm in Vilnius right now, where we are expanding our team quite a bit. So I'm not in my home country, Sweden, but it's equally snowy and rainy and all that.
Well, it's same as Vancouver then. It's gray and rainy here. Same weather.
Do you ski?
You know what? I used to snowboard, but not anymore.
I remember the first time I went to Vancouver for business. I think I was visiting EA there. In the weekend, I took the opportunity to go up to what's it called? It's called
Whistler.
Whistler, yeah, Whistler.
Yeah.
That was amazing skiing.
It's
awesome.
so beautiful there. Yeah, the powder. It's the perfect place to learn because if you fall, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Well, good to know. All right, cool. So why don't we get straight into it? I mean, kind of a mandatory first question. I mean, you've been working, with indie development. You've been at big ones like Riot and EA. But let's just take a step back. I mean, how did you get into game development in the first place? And why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm a part of that generation that didn't necessarily go to school for games or didn't really even know you could work in games as a career. So my family's a really creative family. My dad was a painter. My mom's creative too. So I grew up in a very creative environment. And I think I thought I wanted to work in fine art in some way. So I went to school for that. And then eventually it was the late 90s, early 2000s, and everything was going digital. And I saw the change. And I was a photographer. I went back to school to do some digital training, and I really gravitated towards the team management, team leadership side of it rather than creating the content myself. And then I met a project manager from EA, and through that, and I think I learned about her role and went, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't even know that was a job. And then a friend of mine worked at EA and said, you'd be a really good producer. And I went, I don't know, what's a producer? I had no idea. And that was in 2001-ish, around there, 2001, 2002. And then I ended up working in a fine art environment, but as a producer working on digital content, and then eventually made my way into games development.
All right. So do you feel like you ever had to use or had the opportunity to use the fact that you are actually creatively talented, as a way to get respect with a team and people not being like, oh, you're this manager person, you don't understand what we're doing,
Absolutely. I think it gave me a big advantage because I think when I came in, I understood that creativity isn't something you can always plan. And so I think I, from the get-go, really understood that you need flexibility, you need collaboration, you need everyone to work together. And it isn't about all these kind of individual creative geniuses doing things and then a manager telling them what to do. That's never how I've looked at it. And I think it did help. Like, it's funny you asked that. I think when I first started, I used to intentionally tell people, no, my dad was an artist. That's all he did. That's how he raised our family. Because I felt like it would, I guess, like endear myself to people a little bit and encourage them that I did understand what they were trying to do. Yeah.
Cool. And if we then fast forward a little bit here, one of the things that makes me very excited about this conversation is that, your studio was born during COVID.
Yes.
So we're not having this story about, okay, there was this team or the studio and you had to adapt and what's going to happen now after you were born COVID,
Yeah, we were.
So can you tell a bit about that? I mean, why was the studio created? And how do you think, being born, during in the middle of this whole COVID crisis actually kind of shaped and formed, how this came about?
Yeah, I think, so the three original people that got together, so Joe Nichols, who most recently was a VP of Maxis at EA, it was kind of his idea a few years ago, and he started talking to different groups, and he found a lot of cultural alignment with Sumo Digital, Sumo Group in the UK, and they're the ones that kind of helped us get off the ground. And then he approached Jeff Coates, who's our creative director. I had worked with both of them a long time ago at EA, and then they brought me into the fold as well. And as we started talking, we knew this is a new reality. There was no studio, and it also kind of makes starting a little bit easier because you already have all the tools at home. I need a computer, I need a monitor, I need a webcam, maybe a keyboard and a mouse. And we were already used to that. We'd all been already working. We'd been doing it for a year. So creating it out of that was, I'm going to say, easy. It sounds like a strange thing to say because game development isn't easy, but it was easier, I think, being like, we have to have a location, we have to have an office, we all have to get together every day. We just totally didn't even really think about that. And so when we all came together, found our tech director, Keith Henschel, who I'd worked with previously at the coalition as well, we just gelled really quickly into forming Timbre and knowing what our values were. And one of those values was flexibility of work location, because we'd seen it work, and I was at the coalition, our productivity didn't go down. We shipped an update to Gears 5 on the new console. We shipped a bunch of multiplayer updates, and we shipped a really large campaign DLC, all working from home, and did it really well and shipped really quality stuff. And we adapted so quickly. We knew we could do it, and we knew that it would succeed, I guess, in some ways. Yeah.
Do you, are things going to change when we are step by step moving out of COVID, or do you think you will continue in pretty much the same way?
We're going to do both. We're going to do a hybrid. So we've found that there are team members we actually tease one of our team members because she jokes she's becoming Gollum because she spends so much time at home and she's very social. But we have other people that really love working at home and don't plan on ever coming into the office. We just hired a QA manager who's in Ontario, and we're all based in BC, in British Columbia, in Canada. We have an amazing programmer who's located in Montreal. Whether she relocates, we said that's okay. It's up to you. So we're going to make sure that all the systems and the way that we work complements whatever that person wants in terms of what's best for them. Actually, not necessarily what's best for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things I find kind of very cool with everything I've kind of seen with you is you're really leaning into production best practices. And obviously taking what we're doing, I think that's awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, you're gonna GDC is back this spring, and you're gonna give a speech there, right?
Yes, I'm a part of a micro talk. A micro talk series. So just 10 minutes. But what it is, the theme, it's Grant Schonkweiler put it together, and I believe there's 5 of us, and he just gave us the theme of leading a team through change. And a major change. And he just said, you pick a topic. And I thought, well, gosh, starting a new studio during COVID, that's a lot of change for a team. So maybe I'll focus on that. And so what I'm going to talk about is, how is it when you just say to your team, they ask you a question, well, how do you want to do this? How do you want to do this? How do you want to do this? And you just say, I don't know. How do you want to do it? And how empowering that is. It's scary. It can be a little destabilizing for you and the team, but that's okay. And I think it builds resilience. And then having them say to you, well, I'd like to do it like this, instead of assuming as a director or whatever your role is that you know best, because maybe you don't know. It's all brand new territory. And I think we've learned so much doing that. And then having the team tell you, well, I'd like to try this and I'd like to try this, and then coaching them through it rather than that more top down, it must be this way.
Yeah. So I'm going to read out the title for today, because there's actually a lot in that sentence. So the way we formulated today is breaking down team silos for productivity, inclusion, and winning the best talent. There's a lot in that sentence, and I think maybe what we should start with is actually explaining a bit what team silos actually mean. So
Yeah.
for the ones that aren't familiar with that whole idea, of a silo when we're talking about organization, maybe we can start in the end of what is actually a team silo. How does that happen? I mean, just
Yeah.
for someone who isn't familiar with that concept.
Absolutely. And it can happen in any industry. It doesn't have to be games development, right? And it's so we talk about silos, games development, we talk about disciplines. So that's like a designer, an artist, an engineer. That's the work you do that contributes to the game. But really that exists in any industry, what your role is and what your day-to-day is. That could be accounting and marketing, two different roles. And what we know in games and a creative industry, same with film production or web development or anything, is we're all working together towards one goal. But what we can tend to do is just focus in. I call it putting on blinders, like a horse, like you're like this, and you're just looking at what you're building instead of looking at how it fits to what everyone else is building at the same time. And we can tend as creative people or technical people to just put our heads down and just do our work instead of pulling your head up a little bit and looking at what's around you. And there's also a joke. I think I was trying to remember if it's in the comic, but I think it is that Jeff Coates, our creative director, did about the silos, where he has two people and the guy is just dumping garbage over a fence, and he's just saying, "You deal with it," right? Which is has happened and can happen in games development or in any type of collaborative atmosphere where someone is so heads down, they build a thing, they throw it over the fence and hand it to you, and you get it, and you go, it's not what I needed or wanted, or I don't know how to use it. And so that's a big value of Timbres, is to break that stuff down and get rid of those old habits people might have to working like that.
You were mentioning that this happens in other industries too, and I have one example of a friend who's been coaching a car company to become more agile in how they work. I'm not going to mention the company, but he said it's very complicated to try to break down kind of team silos there, because they literally sit in different houses, in different buildings.
Yeah.
So he's like, is there any chance we can organize ourselves in a more cross-functional way and actually have the teams well, this is before COVID, but sit together. Now when I say this example, I realize that in one way it might actually be easier to do this in an environment where you're distributed, because it's less about changing a physical environment and more about just saying, guys, this is your new team members, and this is the objectives. It might actually be easier when you're online. Okay, so before we go into the meat of this and the consequences of breaking down team silos, I just want to go back to your background, both from indie, but also from Riot and EA. If you would say, okay, this is kind of what I brought from each place into what you do now, because obviously being part of starting a studio, you're kind of giving birth to something new, and it's really your baby, and it's going to be very important, okay, this is what I really contribute to making this great. So I guess that you have something great to bring from Riot, something great to bring from EA, something great to bring from Indies, etc., right?
Yeah, I think, for me, probably it's my most recent experience at the Coalition, because I was there for 8 years working on Gears of War. And, when I got there, the teams were very siloed. So it kind of comes back to what we were talking about a little bit. There was producers who managed a single discipline, very separated, and teams weren't working in this kind of cross-functional way. And that's, one of the first things I tried to help the team with is to say, hey, let's try and create some cross-functional teams, a cross-functionality, and create this more sense of your team is your whole team working on something, not just your discipline. So that's definitely something I've taken with me. And I certainly really credit actually Rod Ferguson, who was the former studio head at the Coalition, with teaching me a ton. He has years of experience in this industry, and watching how he led creative and was so clear on his vision. And I think that clarity of vision is something that actually Jeff, our creative director at Timbre, and I talk about a lot, and creating clarity and how important that is, and making sure that when you're in a review, it's like there's very clear feedback and people know the direction they're going in. Um, and so it's very clear, yeah, the goal that you have and how to get there. Even if you don't have all the answers, it's okay to say, I don't know, but it's also okay to have this very clear vision and make sure that everything is aligning to that. And then iterate inside that. And so I think that's a few of the things I've taken with me. I certainly inclusion is incredibly important at Timbre. It's one of our main values. It's something you'll see in a lot of our online presence, and that's certainly something I didn't see at EA and at Riot. And it affected me a lot, to be totally honest. And so something we talk a lot about at Timbre is, okay, let's do this differently. Let's make sure we're not, the latest studio that's having an article written about us because we've messed up in that area. And how do we make sure at every step we're hiring people that are going to be a culture add into what we've already created?
Oh, you
Yeah,
said culture add. That's
I
what I say.
did.
We are
Do you
recruiting a
say that
lot
too?
right now, and every recruiter I'm talking to, they're like, "Okay, so what are you looking for in terms of culture fit?" I was like, "No, we're looking for culture add."
I'm so
Yeah,
excited,
yeah, yeah,
Patrick. That's
yeah.
awesome. We had that same conversation when our recruiting partners came and joined us, and I was like, "Hey, everyone, we're not going to say this anymore because if you're a culture fit, what are you adding to what already exists?" Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And all right, so let's go back then to our nice title here. Okay, so let's say now we're breaking down a team silos, and how. Well, I mean, let's just talk about productivity and inclusion
Yeah.
and winning the
Yeah.
best talent. I mean, we got those three. I mean, I think they're quite self-explanatory why they're good. I mean, we
Yeah.
all want higher
Of
productivity. We
course.
want to get the best talent. Maybe we should actually start with inclusion, because
Yeah.
obviously, I think everyone. Well, it's the discourse, so to say, in society is that this is great, but why? I think we need to
Yeah.
talk about, so why is it actually important?
Yeah, and I think I'll clarify a little bit too, because what I feel like out there, the discourse is diversity, right? Diverse hiring, diverse teams, and we're just not talking about inclusion. And I think we can see that what's been happening is you can hire a whole bunch of diverse people, but if they don't feel included, they're just going to leave or not contribute in a way that is great for them or for you. And you won't have that healthy environment and actually push yourself to innovate, have different perspectives, and truly have the culture add, kind of what we were talking about. So that's sort of Timbre's perspective in mind too, is how do you make sure when you're hiring someone into your company that they're themselves when they come to work every day? They get to be who they truly are, and they aren't covering or hiding that true self every day at work. And you're going to get more out of them. You're going to get more innovation. You're going to create better games, better products, better ideas come from that sense of inclusion and psychological safety for people. Where, yeah, it's really about being your true self. It's kind of how I look at inclusion.
And how do you then, so I read this book quite a while ago that I found very interesting, which was basically saying that if you have a very diverse team, that is definitely going to boost things like creativity, innovation, etc.
Yeah.
And then it kind of asks the question, so why aren't we all doing it that way? And what about productivity? And then it
Yeah.
basically says, what's often forgotten, because we tend to talk about this in terms of the positives, is that actually a diverse team, diversity in itself actually affects productivity
Right.
negatively.
In the
Um,
short term.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the point is make is that you need to unite around other things. It's like
Yeah.
if you're not uniting around that you're all studying at this exact same place at the same time, or that you all look the same or whatever. If that's not the thing uniting you, then you need something else that unites you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
as a leader, if you want to get the best out of this, you're putting together a team which is very diverse, but then you actually need to make a very conscious effort around, well, what's
Yes.
then the thing that's going to unite us?
Yeah.
So does this resonate with you? How do you work with
Absolutely.
this?
Yeah, it's funny because I heard you in one of your previous podcasts, you brought that up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's it. It's absolutely true. And I think what's so interesting is, yeah, you need I don't call it a rallying cry, but you're right. You need something that everyone can rally around and all feel significance. Like it's really that goal, I guess, that I keep thinking about. And I think for us at Timbre, it really is our values. And because same thing with creating a studio during COVID, we're all remote, but we also have built around this culture add values proposition to everybody. And we've already created a pretty diverse team in terms of gender. We still have a long way to go in other areas, but it's already created a very different atmosphere. It's very noticeable to myself and a lot of people at the studio. And it's this extremely collaborative, everybody can make comments about the game we're creating. There's no anyone, saying, don't you comment on this thing, don't you comment on that thing. And so it's naturally breaking down the silos. I'm kind of laughing because I'm thinking about what's been created and how the team itself has actually created that culture. They've grabbed onto it and they own it. And they're the ones saying, no, 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 no. Of course, that person can comment on this. Hey, what's your opinion about this? I want to show you something. And no one is going, you're this discipline, you shouldn't do this thing. Or there's no one saying, stay in your lane or don't get involved. And they naturally include each other in their everyday activities. And so they are creating a culture of inclusion themselves because they know that that's why they came to Timbre.
And how do you, we also have here recruiting, getting the best talent. And I think many can, feel the heat in the market right
Oh
now.
my
For
gosh,
talent.
it's crazy, right?
Yeah. It's so many, new amazing studios,
Yeah.
tech companies in general. And there's so much money in the market. And it is a bit crazy. How do you make sure that it's just not becoming kind of words and
Yeah.
also that people that you manage to engage in a conversation around working at your studio that they actually really feel this.
Yeah.
Practically, how do you do it?
That's a great question. You're reminding me that every single person we've interviewed has also said to us, great culture, great marketing. How do you plan on keeping this culture as you scale? So that's something everyone we interview is asking because they've had that experience where they've been sold something in the interview and it hasn't proved to be true when they got to the company. And so, practically, really for us, it's constantly checking in with the team and saying to them, are we succeeding? Are we doing what we should be? Is this working for you? It's interesting. I've been helping run the team retrospectives, which I need to book one. It's reminding me I need to do one this week. But I've never run a team retrospective and had the team say the number one thing that's working is communication. Communication is always the number one thing that we need to make better. Always. None of those teams were remote. The number one thing our team keeps bringing up in the retrospective is that communication is great. And I find that fascinating. And so that's not, we're like, okay, that's working. And I find that super interesting. And so, that retrospective feedback, getting that from the team, and certainly what we need to do practically is make sure that we're also doing those with people who aren't just on our game team, but are in those operations roles as well. But it's really interesting taking the feedback, saying to the team, okay, let's collaboratively figure out how we're going to move these things forward and how we keep improving. And it's something we really embrace. And I think also as directors, we're very available. Joe Nichols, our studio head, he's having one-on-ones with everyone on the team right now. That's hard to scale, but we'll try and do it as much as we can. We've been extremely transparent and open with the team as things change. As soon as things happen, business-wise, or Sumo Group was just recently purchased by Tencent. So as soon as we could tell the team, we made sure we let them know. And so just being really transparent with leadership. And I just keep coming back to that collaborative culture building that we're doing with the team involved in it. Yeah.
It's super interesting what you said there about communication working.
Yeah.
We actually had, I'm not saying this, just to kind of chime in and, say hooray, but we actually had to say, because we're recruiting quite a lot ourselves now.
Yeah.
And then we were doing a bit of retrospective on, okay, what's really important now that we keep as we are expanding the team. And that actually came up. And I find it so interesting that in a distributed team, that's the thing that comes up as a good, something that works. Because you're absolutely right that very often, when people are, going to complain about something, it's like, oh, we need to communicate better.
Always, right?
Yeah.
Like I find it fascinating. Like I even went back and looked at old retrospectives from previous teams, and I was like, why was communication so terrible when we were all in the same space? And maybe it's because we're forced to over communicate right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to I'm going to give a little shout out to working with Favreau as software, because you and I've chatted about this previously a little bit, but it is so encouraging the team to collaborate. And previously at previous companies, I'd worked with a very well-known software that I've always felt changed the way we communicated and collaborated. And it broke people apart. It was so difficult to create like a collaborative online software space where everyone could see and visualize the work.
Yeah.
Or you were in an Excel sheet and then you're exporting data from this super complex database, and it turned producers into data managers instead of, team coaches. And I think I really credit that to you with us saying at the very beginning, and I said this to our lead producer, was my challenge to her, is I said, I want to find software that's human.
Yeah, cool. I should totally steal that as a tagline. I hope our head of marketing is listening.
You can have it. It's yours.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, you're touching upon something which is at the core of what we're trying to, one of our, the original idea of Favreau, and also what we're trying to tell the market now, which is really that, if you are deliberately trying to have a team with, autonomous, teams within the team, and you want to have a flat organization, and you actually want to be successful with a lot of the things that you've been talking about, the tooling that you're using, that's not like an IT question, it's a strategic question.
Yes.
Because it you have a lot of, gravity coming from that. So if you're in studio leadership and you're trying to get all these things right, but then, you're picking, a tool which is, based on centralization, and everything just becomes a pile of tickets,
Yes. A pile of tickets. That's
then it's exactly as you were saying, is going to create the force, which is actually ruining what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's working against you.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, so far, it's not everyone who have realized that it creates that force. And I think we have a job to do in terms of educating the market that, what, it actually matters what kind of tooling you pick.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was interrupting you there.
Yeah, no, I was going to just add to that what you're saying about tools, because, in the games industry, we never invest in tools for production for the team. It's just not something teams do. And those tools programmers who could be helping you create tools that are work the way you want them to work, you spend so much time building the engine, the tools for the designers, the artists, and all these different groups, and it's just impossible to get that bandwidth to create the best tools for production. And why don't we invest in those things? It's one of the most important things that you do, is helping your team collaborate. So.
Well, I'm obviously biased here, but many of our developers are former game developers,
right?
And or creating some game on the side. Yeah. So maybe we are that group. Yeah. But anyways, enough plugging your favor here. So I want to ask you a final question, which is, 2022 is going to be a very interesting year.
Yeah.
Where, knock on wood, we are finally moving into a little bit more, let's say, normal.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm Swedish. Wednesday this week, the government in Sweden said, okay, now COVID is no longer, kind of like what they call like extra serious.
Right.
It's basically classified as like another flu, which means that kind of all restrictions and everything kind of went away. So I mean, at least technically in Sweden, things are back to normal. And I heard that many other countries are moving the same way. So with that said, it's likely that 2022 is going to be the year when we get back to some kind of normal. So with that, I mean, what are you looking forward to the most this year?
What I'm looking forward to, and a lot of people on our team have said this, is social outings with our team. When we were really small, we had a little short period of time in Canada before Omicron, and we were all vaccinated. And we were only about 10 people, and we had a few team lunches on Friday afternoons, and we had so much fun. And I was so looking forward to that. Just getting together with team. There's people on our team I haven't met in person. And I just would love to have a team lunch where I can just ask people about their personal lives and get to know them. And a lot of our team has been saying, I just miss the social activity, not necessarily sitting in a studio working with people, because we're doing great working remotely, but it's the social aspect.
Yeah.
And I think we spend so much time at work, people are missing those social connections. And it is definitely challenging to make those online. And then I'm looking forward to traveling again. Oh my gosh, I want to travel to another country other than Canada. I love Canada, but I love traveling. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, you are going to GDC, right? So
hopefully I might deliver my speech online. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. But
yeah, well, I hope, if unless something goes, the opposite direction now, I will bring a small team and I will go to DICE in Vegas great. And I will go to GDC. And I totally hear you on what you were saying. We actually did pull together our team for our first. We call it, since we don't do offsites, since we're remote first, we call it onsites. And we did an onsite like just before Christmas. And it was so much fun, because a lot of the people in my team, they actually met for the first time, and it was people that actually had never met each other in person, and we hired them without having met them. We hired them remote, and now suddenly we're in the same room. And I was a little bit afraid that it was going to be awkward, but it was not. Everyone was just so happy that we could just hang out. And we really planned, those days to not be about making business decisions or because, we're comfortable working remote, but actually be about more just hanging out and hang out, getting to know each other.
So important. Yeah, we did that. We had a Christmas dinner instead of a Christmas party in early December. And the same thing, it was just seeing each other in person, and it was almost like a reunion, even though we hadn't all met each other. So we're looking forward to that for sure.
All right, awesome. Hey, this was really good. I hope we continue the conversation in a not too distant future. And maybe
sure we will.
Maybe we'll have a second podcast. Part 2. Going deeper. I mean, some of the best games I ever played. Sometimes part 2 is better than part 1. And I think this was a very good part 1. So that is really good.
Sounds great. It was great to chat with you, and hopefully I'll end up at GDC and we'll get to go have a drink and a chat in person.
Sounds great. I hope that too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Patric.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I certainly did. If you want to elevate yourself as a modern leader and help your teams become even more successful, then check out Favor Academy at favro.com. There you will find podcasts, webinars, articles, all free of charge. Check it out.